Good evening from New York. I'm Antonia Hilton in tonight for Chris Hayes. Today we saw the Trump doctrine in full effect, both domestically and abroad. Here at home, Donald Trump fired his Attorney General Pam Bondi via social media post. He said Bondi will, quote, be transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. For now, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has been elevated to acting AG. MSNOW reports that there's already a short list to replace Bondi in the long term, including current EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, former Fox News personality and current U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, and Trump's former personal lawyer Alina Habba, who is currently on the job market after an appeals court disqualified her from serving as the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Now, to be clear, Trump did not fire Bondi for any of the obvious reasons you might be thinking about at home. For example, he did not fire her for dismissing Epstein survivors, refusing to look them in the eye, or for public outbursts during congressional hearings.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the way
ridiculous.
I asked it.
Chairman Jordan, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people.
Bondi is also not on the outs for her weaponization of the Justice Department for political ends. You may recall last year when Trump accidentally posted on social media what seemed to be a private message to Bondi, directly pressuring her to launch investigations into his political opponents, including James Comey, Senator Adam Schiff, and New York AG Tish James. All three were indeed investigated. Comey and James were even indicted, although those cases eventually fell apart at the seams. And ultimately, that is why Trump fired her, because she failed, because she was unable to wield the DOJ as a weapon against Trump's perceived enemies. As the Wall Street Journal reported back in January, quote, chief among Trump's grievances is what he sees as Bondi's failure to quickly and effectively prosecute the investigators who had pursued him for years. It seems Trump wants an attorney general who will execute his agenda, facts and rule of law be damned, one who will prosecute anyone he says he wants prosecuted, and who will successfully withhold the Epstein files in defiance of federal law, and somehow accomplish all of that without creating a PR problem, turning it into his Achilles heel. That is really the core of the Trump doctrine. He kind of wants to govern like a king, and he needs someone who will wield the Justice Department like a sword. He did joke he might be a dictator on day one. The thing is, this is also how Trump conducts his foreign policy. It was the logic behind his decision, for example, to snatch the leader of a sovereign country, Venezuela, and throw him in a jail cell in Brooklyn, because he wanted more control of this hemisphere. It was that mission that Trump seems to be trying to emulate with his war now with Iran. Unilateral strikes without permission from Congress, without consulting the UN or our NATO allies, in order to topple a foreign government, and with zero regard for the rules of engagement. Rules his defense secretary, of course, has been disregarding as woke. Often the only rules that Trump recognizes are the ones that he's set for himself. It is why, as we saw last night, he is still unable to clearly define the reasons we entered this war in the first place, apart from unsubstantiated claims about their imminent nuclear capabilities. It's also why he's unable to tell us a clear end game here. So the war is just dragging on for a few more weeks at least, but maybe even longer. 13 Americans have died, 3,500 Iranians, and about 1,500 others throughout the Middle East. And here at home, oil prices are surging, but you know that. Experts are warning of the potential for an energy crisis, worse than the oil shocks of the 1970s. And Donald Trump can't or won't find an off-ramp because the Trump doctrine says he can take what he wants and remove anyone in his way without any regard for the consequences, whether that's in Iran or it's at the Justice Department. Joining me now with the latest is Ken Delanian, Justice and Intelligence Correspondent for MSNOW. Ken, it's good to see you. So you have been talking to sources all day long, I know. Tell me, what more have you learned about Bondi's departure?
Well, for one thing, Antonia, it seems to have been a surprise to Bondi and her camp. She didn't see it coming. which is maybe surprising to all of us because it was pretty clear that she was on thin ice over the Epstein matter, as well as you laid out very well there, essentially her failure to weaponize the Justice Department sufficiently enough and successfully enough. But it did seem to come as a surprise. You know, Bondi and Trump went together to the Supreme Court to hear the birthright citizenship arguments, and we're not exactly sure when he gave her the news, but I was talking to people close to her today who weren't fully up to speed on exactly what was happening. But look, I think it's a combination of things that led to this dismissal. You're right to say that the primary reason, as we understand it, according to sources, was Trump's growing dissatisfaction with her inability to deliver on essentially putting his enemies in prison. But of course, we all know the reason she hasn't been able to deliver is not for lack of a willingness, a lack of her capacity to try to use the Justice Department to do this. It's been the legal system, the court system, the grand jurors resisting indicting, for example, the 6 members of Congress who told the military that they are free to ignore illegal orders, and judges who dismissed the cases against James Comey and Letitia James on the grounds that the U.S. attorney wasn't properly appointed. And if Donald Trump thinks that some other person, Eric Schmidt of Missouri or Jeanine Pirro or someone else is going to be more successful, he's in for a rude awakening, because there are just structural impediments to doing what he wants done in the face of a lack of evidence. But Bondi also suffered, as we've been talking about all day, from her mishandling of the Epstein files situation, when she famously, set expectations by handing a bunch of binders to right-wing influencers, suggesting that there was new information. Turned out there wasn't any new information, and she went on Fox and said she had Epstein's client list on her desk, and she had to later acknowledge there was no client list. And then she went full circle, endorsing a Justice Department view that the files shouldn't be released, that there was nothing left to say on the matter. And of course, she had to reverse that in the face of a law passed by Congress requiring her to release those files, which they then did, but they did it by many accounts badly. And they redacted things that shouldn't have been redacted, and they held back documents related to Donald Trump. They released the names of some victims and some victim information. And so a growing number of even Republicans in Congress were dissatisfied with her handling of the Epstein files. And that laid the groundwork for Donald Trump to fulfill his dissatisfaction with her handling of these prosecutions of his enemies.
Ken Delanian, always good to have you. Thank you. Congressman Eric Swalwell, he's a Democrat from California. He serves on the Judiciary Committee and is a candidate for governor. He joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. So, as I'm sure you saw, Shelby Talcott from Semaphore was on with me earlier today, and she's been reporting that part of the reason Bondi was fired is that Trump suspects that Bondi leaked some information to you about an effort by the administration to release files from a 10-year-old closed investigation into your relationship with an alleged Chinese spy. Did Bondi or anyone in her orbit leak information to you, Congressman?
No, the Attorney General did not tip us off. No one in her orbit tipped us off. It was FBI agents who tipped off the Washington Post because they saw this effort by Kash Patel and Donald Trump to try and interfere in a California governor's race that I have been leading. And so, what this shows, though, and what is quite concerning, is that Donald Trump is seeing ghosts. He's certainly gunning for us, and he wants an attorney general who's willing to break the law and weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. That is what has to be intolerable, not just for Pam Bondi, and I don't know the reasons why she was let go, but it has to be intolerable for anybody who sits in that chair and carries out what we hope to be the rule of law and a system of justice.
So you say you don't know the reason that she was fired, but you know that it wasn't you.
I have no idea.
I'm curious, though. If
but I'm in Donald Trump's head, and he's tweeting at me at 4:45 in the morning. So,
hey, I cannot get into Donald Trump's head. I would never ask that of you. But when you look at the facts, at what we do know, at what my colleague Ken Delanian just laid out there, do you see this as a case that's more likely about her failure to successfully go after his perceived enemies, like yourself, like Adam Schiff, like Tish James, although they're trying another route to go after her right now? Or do you see this as an Epstein-related PR problem?
It concerns me that it looks like it's the former, that she won't go after enough enemies. And by the way, I don't know many Americans who are saying, I need Donald Trump to go after more of his political enemies. They're already seeing him come for Adam Schiff, Tish James, Lisa Cook, myself, the 6 members of Congress who spoke out about what the military can and cannot do. This is not what people want the president to prioritize. And I can't speak for every American, but I can speak for Californians. And Californians want him to just focus on being a president who lowers the costs on day one. He hasn't lowered the costs on day one. He's been a dictator since day one. That's the only promise that he's kept. But people want him to just lower the costs.
Do Democrats have much to celebrate? I've seen some of your colleagues putting out statements. I know they're certainly not shedding a tear for Bondi today, but we have now Blanche, who some of the survivors that our team has spoken to, in some cases, they actually see him as even more responsible because he flew down, met with Ghislaine Maxwell. After that interaction, she, of course, got into better digs in this sort of prison camp. And he's sort of been side by side with her throughout that entire process. Then we know that Lee Zeldin is interested in the job, Jeanine Pirro. I mean, is there a scenario in which, from the Democratic perspective, what comes next is even worse?
That's right. This is not something to celebrate because we know Donald Trump's instincts here seem to be that he wants somebody to exercise maximum corruption against his political enemies. And what the Deputy Attorney General and Acting Attorney General should know is that Democrats are going to win the Congress this coming fall. And Jamie Raskin and Robert Garcia are going to have gavels, and they're going to have the subpoena power, and they're going to have the power of oversight and the power of the purse, Speaker Jeffries, to fund Congress. It's all coming out. It always has in the history of our country, from J. Edgar Hoover to Watergate and Richard Nixon to the last time Donald Trump was elected and acted so corruptly. It is all coming out. And by the way, we are at war. Gas prices are soaring. Iran seeks to attack us on the homeland, and the surveillance powers that the FBI uses expire on April 20. Democrats are telling me, over 100 of them have told me that they will not reauthorize this if this is what they are doing with their law enforcement powers, that they will not give them those powers to protect the homeland if it's just going to be used to go after their political enemies. The stakes are high, and the consequences, though, for abuses of power come this time next year will be even higher.
Speaking of oversight, what do you think the chances are that she actually comes forward and goes before lawmakers and testifies under oath as she was supposed to do in just a matter of days?
That should still happen. And this, the Epstein, debacle and the promises that the president made, it's not going away. There's more questions now than, have been answered from the multiple witnesses who have come forward, and the lack of, I would say, compliance that the administration has shown on releasing the files. And Democrats
well, what
have
are
said,
Democrats going to do if she simply does not? I mean, our colleague Michael Schnell, she spoke with staff for Chairman Comer, and it sounds like the suggestion seemed to be, if she's not AG anymore, why would we have her show up? So what are Democrats going to do if she tries to wiggle out of this?
Well, Democrats have, on this issue, been able to find Republican co-sponsors. There are people like Thomas Massey and others who have worked with us to find justice for these victims. And the margins in Congress are so thin right now that you don't need to find too many. And that's, again, why I am telegraphing that when Democrats are in the majority next year, it's all coming out. And so the brave FBI agents who came forward to, make it clear what abuses were occurring against us in this governor's race last week, come forward now. If you continue these abuses, you will be before Congress. Reputationally, you won't get through this. If you come forward, though, and you say no to these abuses, and you tell the Congress and the whistleblower protections that you have, you will be protected. It's that clear right now, and the stakes of not coming forward for our democracy are so consequential and could end this 250-year experiment of freedom.
All right, Congressman Eric Swalwell, good to see you. Thank you.
You too. My pleasure.
Coming up, what's Pam Bondi's replacement going to do that she could not? The sliding scale of Trump's attorney general picks. That's next after this break. Picks for attorney general. You may recall his very first attorney general back in 2017, Jeff Sessions, a name I haven't said in a while, recused himself from the DOJ's Russia investigation into Trump. And the president, he was big mad.
The attorney general says, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm going to recuse. And I said, why the hell didn't he tell me that before I put him in? How do you recuse yourself?
When Donald Trump fired Jeff Sessions, he was ultimately replaced by William Barr, who had written a whole treatise on how to defend the president from the Mueller probe. But Barr would eventually resign, too, under pressure after telling reporters that contrary to Trump's version of events, there was no significant fraud in the 2020 election. Trump's first AG choice for his second term, remember, was none other than Matt Gaetz, who didn't even make it to a Senate vote. And so then Pam Bondi took the baton until she apparently irked the president by mismanaging the Epstein case, and her prosecutions of Trump's perceived enemies got stalled. So now we get Todd Blanche as acting attorney general. The president's former criminal defense attorney, who moved Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell to a cushier prison after a conversation in which Maxwell made sure to emphasize that she never saw the president doing anything illegal. Donald Trump has run through a long list of MAGA loyalists in search of an attorney general who will do his complete bidding. And it raises the question, what exactly will Todd Blanche or his eventual successor do for Trump that Pam Bondi wouldn't or couldn't? Barbara McQuaid is a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan and the author of The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. Paul Butler is a former federal prosecutor specializing in public corruption and a Washington Post contributing columnist. They both join me now. Great to have you guys. Barbara, I'll start with you and basically ask you the question that I just posed there. What is Todd Blanche going to be able to do that Pam Bondi wasn't able to accomplish? And that's not to take up for her, but especially on the side of going after Trump's enemies. If the facts just aren't there, there's really no way to invent them. How is Blanche or anyone else going to be able to work with that same reality but get a different result?
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if Todd Blanche were able to get a different result. I think maybe what Donald Trump is accomplishing by making this switch are a couple of things. One is he's received so much criticism from his base about the Epstein files. He can perhaps hope to sweep it all away by blaming it all on Pam Bondi and putting someone else in the spot. This is just an acting spot, so it may be that Todd Blanche does not stay through the duration, but he has proven his bona fides to Donald Trump. As you say, he represented Donald Trump in his criminal cases, representing him not only in the hush money case in Manhattan, but also the federal cases involving the documents at Mar-a-Lago and the election interference case. So Donald Trump, no doubt, has confidence in him and his loyalty, which seems to be more important than anything else. But Todd Blanche is somebody who has, declared war on the judiciary. He is someone who bragged to CPAC most recently about cleaning house and ridding the department of the people at the FBI and the prosecutors at DOJ who prosecuted those cases, as well as the January 6 cases. But as you said, it wasn't for lack of trying that Pam Bondi was unable to convict Donald Trump's enemies. We saw her make efforts to charge Jim Comey and Letitia James, Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve, Tim Walz and Jacob Fry in Minnesota, and even members of Congress who did nothing more than record a video accurately reciting the law. But there are safeguards in the criminal justice system, in the grand jury, and in judges, and in the jury system. And I don't think Todd Blanche is going to have any more luck than Pam Bondi did in getting those guardrails to fail.
Paul, moments ago, I asked Congressman Swalwell about Democrats who have been waiting for weeks and weeks to get Pam Bondi in front of them to testify under oath. Now there seem to be some signals that Republicans may, or some Republicans may, try to help her get out of that, now that it's, I guess, no longer her job. Do you think that Todd Blanche is a good substitute, that they have a way to make sure she still shows up for a subpoena in her name? What do you think they have at their disposal to still make something happen here?
Congress has the ability to subpoena anybody who's under the jurisdiction of the United States. Steve Bannon got into criminal trouble when he refused to obey a subpoena from Congress. And so, yes, she's being asked to testify about her response or lack thereof to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. She's got to come. She wasn't subpoenaed as the Attorney General. She was subpoenaed as Pam Bondi. And Antonia, I have to say, Congressman Swalwell was a lot calmer than I would be based on today's news, because we know that the president has been gunning for him. And if Bondi was fired because she wasn't partisan enough, she wasn't willing to go all the way and do all the things to weaponize the Justice Department, then surely he is now looking for someone who will do that. So Swalwell, Alvin Bragg, there are a number of people who've got to be concerned about today's developments, not because there's any evidence that they committed a crime, but that no longer is a barrier to being investigated and prosecuted by the Trump administration.
Barbara, if Bondi can be pushed out despite the fact that she has been so loyal, that she at least gave all these prosecutions a go, there are still many in the works. I mean, they're coming back after Tish James. First it was mortgage fraud. Now they're trying to go the insurance fraud route. You know, if she, after doing all of that, still gets pushed out of the inner circle, what does this tell you about what's happening inside of the DOJ right now? I mean, particularly at a time when there are real domestic threats to Americans because of this war that the president has dragged us into. Are you worried about what's going on inside the department below just whoever is the head of it?
Oh, absolutely. And I have been for some time. The Justice Department has, since Watergate, been an independent agency that works to protect the public safety and American interest. It represents not the president, but the people of the United States. And instead, what we've seen in the Trump administration is an effort to use the Justice Department as his own personal law firm, right? I mean, he went to the Great Hall and announced that he was going to be himself the chief law enforcement officer. His face hangs from a banner outside the building. All of those things suggest that it is not the kind of job that most of us held when we were there, but is instead a political job. Now, there are still some very good people within the Justice Department, and I'm grateful that they continue to do their work. But it has to be disheartening to see the misplaced priorities of evening scores with President Trump's political enemies instead of focusing on the real threats. And as you say, we're at war with Iran. They are a state sponsor of terrorism. And we have purged a number of national security agents and prosecutors at the very moment when we should be on high alert for those kinds of threats. And so I do worry about the capability and the priorities of the department at this moment.
Paul, quickly before we have to go, what options are ahead of survivors here? Many of them have been, I'm not even sure patient quite describes the way that they have held it together through this entire process. Some of them spoke to our colleague Lisa Rubin earlier, and even in their statements to her seemed to suggest that they were going to leave the door open for the possibility of change here, that maybe Blanche or Zeldin, whoever it might be, would take a different approach with them, that they would be open to having a different kind of relationship with whoever's going to be there than the one that they had with Bondi. If you were advising Epstein survivors about the kinds of moves, options ahead of them right now, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that I've got some bad news. They don't have a lot of great options. They might have some civil remedies, but they should not expect any help from this administration or this Department of Justice. So Bondi was fired reportedly because Trump was mad about how she handled the Epstein files, not because she reportedly didn't respect the Congress law and congressional law, the Transparency Act, and not because she reportedly didn't hand over everything that she was required to hand over. Trump was mad because she didn't protect him enough. She embarrassed him. And so he will find an attorney general who will not make that mistake. So there's no reason that the Epstein survivors should have any hope in Todd Blanche. He was a very good defense attorney for Donald Trump. He did lose that one case with Bragg. Bragg got his client convicted of 34 felons, but he had a good reputation as a defense attorney, Antonia, and he's still been acting like Trump's defense attorney while he's been at the Department of Justice.
So you don't think there's much hope for the survivors to build a different relationship with this DOJ? Paul Butler, thank you. Barbara McQuaid, thank you so much. Still ahead, as Donald Trump tries to gain control of the midterm elections, Stacey Abrams joins me next on what's about to happen. As the Trump administration has been sending ICE agents into airports, they've also spoken publicly about deploying ICE agents to the polls in November. The idea has been floated by Trump's former strategist, Steve Bannon, addressed by his new DHS Secretary, Markwayne Mullin, and referenced by his personal attorney, who just became the new acting attorney general.
Why is there objection to sending ICE officers to polling places? Illegals can't vote. It doesn't make any sense.
That question seems to telegraph what's ahead in Trump's multi-pronged effort to interfere in state-run elections. Just this week, Trump signed an executive order that would allow the federal government to take over mail-in voting, basically allowing Trump officials to decide who gets to vote. Stacey Abrams is the founder of Fair Fight Action and lead organizer of the 10 Steps campaign against the rise of authoritarianism in the U.S. Today, they launched an initiative to end ICE family detention, and she joins me now. Stacey, it's so good to see you. So with this executive order targeting mail-in ballots, what would the implications be if DHS were to have the ability to create and control a verified voters list?
So we have to remember that this is all of a piece. These are administrative attempts to shave points. Every election for the last decade has been decided on the margins. We are no longer having landslides. And so their attempt is to limit who gets counted and how many votes can go to the other side. And so we can't look at these as isolated pieces. They are all of a piece. It's the sum of the parts. So you use the mail-in voting restrictions so you can limit senior citizens, rural folks, students, people of color, the disabled, and you stop them from participating. Then you move over to the challenge of building a voting database that has been proven in every state that has tried this. It has been proven to be flawed. In Texas, in Kansas, in Missouri, the number of people who are falsely denied the right to vote went as high as 35% in Missouri. It was about 14% error rate in Texas in just one county. And in Kansas, I think it was almost 30,000 people who were falsely accused of not being entitled to vote, although they'd gone through a naturalization service. And so we know that these attempts are designed to marry together all of the greatest hits of voter suppression so that they can eke out wins wherever they face losses.
You know, Stacey, one of the things that I've been surprised Democrats haven't been speaking out about more clearly is the extent to which the Trump administration has tried to tie election administration to the future of immigration policy in this country. You know, for example, the way that they very explicitly tried to tie the fates of the SAVE Act, which you hear a lot of people describe as a voter ID law, when really it is a show